Today I'm reading for you from my book Crazy Purified. We're still in the crazy part, and today we are reading a chapter that is called Psycho. I noticed that things were going really bad when I started to be mean towards my daughter. Not really mean, because I truly love my child. So I left her with my mother and isolated myself when I noticed that I started to lose control. When pain on the inside becomes huge, it has to come out somehow. I noticed thoughts in my inner being that was darker than it is allowed to say. But I can tell you one thing. I do understand how people can become really, really mean. Not that this is any kind of excuse, but some types of evil evolves because you're caught in a pain that is so large that the only thing you can do is react. To me, this was a really scary experience. Because even though I was extremely self-destructive, I had up until that point never been consciously evil towards anyone. But now I felt something inside starting to become mean, and I could not stop it. One time I crushed her favorite cup. This was the worst thing I ever did. But to me, this was really bad enough. More than bad enough. The sound of the wounded child crying penetrated my heart with a grief and guilt and shame that was indescribable. I did not want to break that cup. But she was an innocent child with a joy, and I was a broken adult who could not see her, who could no longer take care of her. Everything was spinning so hard in my head. I could barely make lunch for her kindergarten and barely get on the bus. At this point, I was still studying to be a teacher, fall 2016. I became evil there, in my mother's home. But mostly I was just silence, moving mechanically, only being able to do the most necessary, like getting up, getting dressed, and getting her to kindergarten. I could not take care of myself and make myself pretty. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. I could barely even look at myself. When she was in the kindergarten, I sat outside in a park smoking cigarettes like a train. It was the only way I could breathe, to get a break. And then the insanity came back. The thoughts, the panic. I remember I forgot the Santa Claus hat my daughter was supposed to bring to her Santa Claus party. And the caretakers in kindergarten didn't lend her one to make a point that I was a lazy mom. So my daughter had to suffer. My daughter had to suffer because I forgot the Santa Claus hat. I could barely differentiate what day it was. Everything was in a blur, and I was in panic. All I wanted to do was save my daughter, give her a proper life, but my brain had locked. Soon after the incident with her favorite cup, I saw no other choice than to leave her there with my mother and go back to the farm from hell. So I left her, because she couldn't see me like this, my beloved, beloved child, whom I had done everything in my power to give a better life than what I had myself. But I was not good enough because I was broken, even though I, in the good years, did a more detailed foundation for I gave her more foundation, like very detailed, very detailed foundation than most people I know. From homemade food, lots and lots of attention, playing with her, reading books, being present, being full of joy, laughter and care. But now I had lost my mind, and I was not able to change. I was in panic, I was lost, and in addition, a seed of evil was growing inside of me. The thoughts were raging day and night because of all the things that I should have done differently. And the shame and the fear paralyzed me. It totally paralyzed me. The pain was so intense that I had problems breathing. And I started to harm myself physically. I went out in the forest and threw myself in the ground against rocks and roots with full power until I blacked out. I took wires around my throat and pulled them together until I blacked out, and my perception of reality became like jumped around in and out of my sight in a way that if you just turn on and off a light switch. I don't know if I attempted to kill myself, but I wanted to get out of who I had become. I wanted to push stop, pause, or anything that could turn off the train that was raging in a high speed towards the bottom, because I had lost control. I couldn't even take care of myself. Think about that. I was so beautiful, one of the most beautiful, my mom always said to me. But now I was not beautiful. I was gray, skinny, and I was wearing the same clothes day after day. It had said poof in my brain, and I knew that it was impossible to repair the damage. It was too late. In the farm from hell there was an indescribable atmosphere of scary, of death. But it was also a very cozy place on the outside. Maybe the prettiest place that I've ever lived in. But the landlord was very sick in both his head, like mentally, and his body. You know, those kind of people who talks in a manipulative way in such a manner that you get physically ill, even before they open their mouth. You know that what comes out in the other end will somehow harm you or psych you out. So you're just waiting, hoping, and panicking at the same time. Hoping that it will not happen this time, that you will be able to pass by in silence. When you, in addition, are so vulnerable that your teacher says, Christine, you seem like you are skinless, and then move into a place like this, then there is not much hope to get back on your feet. But it was the only place I had to go. So because of that, I'm eternally grateful. Because there was no option, I was eternally grateful for that place. Because there was no option to stay in my mother's house. We didn't know each other, and my mother and my sister had no conception, or they had no ability to understand what was going on with me. It had gone too far for me to have words or language to explain. I had to leave. My daughter could not see me like this. It would harm her even more. So now I am psychotic. I cannot think one whole sentence and of course not express one. I cannot make any decisions. Like shopping is a nightmare. I cannot read a book, not more than a few words, because I lose focus and my mind starts spinning. Here is a drawing that I think is one of the best in the book. Approximately once a week, the man I lived with would get a rage attack because of my apathy. He had enough to deal with himself, so I kind of get it. But he was nice, and I thank God for him when I am reminded of it. He took me in, and in the prophet Isaiah it says, "You shall share your bread with the hungry, and let the helpless and homeless get in shelter. You shall look to the naked and dress him, and do not turn your back on your own. Then your light will shine forth like the morning red sun, and suddenly your healing will come. Your righteousness will go forward before you, and the glory of God will follow behind you." Isaiah 58:7-8. But when he was angry, I had to run. At those times I walked along in the streets. I remember once I sat down in a flower shop behind some big plants and hid. I hid there for like a long time. When the shop owner asked me what I was doing, I said, "I have to breathe." And I sat there for a long time. Later I asked the owner of the shop if I could come home with her. She said no. She said her boyfriend would probably not like it. And then she said, "I'm sorry," and she left. For some reason, this was mainly on Wednesdays, this happened. That he became angry, the guy I live with in the farm from hell. On Thursday, the next day, was the day that I used to spend with my daughter. I picked her up in kindergarten, and I spent the night in my mother's house. I could observe these cycles, and slowly I started to see that there was something evil pulling the strings and controlling the circumstances around me. The fact that he got these rage attacks on Wednesdays made me restless and in panic, often for hours, and sometimes I had to find a place to sleep. And it made me so exhausted and in panic on Thursday. So even though I managed to get through these Thursdays, the whole week then was spent feeling guilty because I didn't pull it through the way I wanted. And when the guilt kind of cycles stopped around Tuesday the next week, and I managed to breathe, there was a tremendous shock when there again was trouble on Wednesday. These cycles is something you noticed when you're so-called psychotic, but I know that what you are identifying is real. When you're psychotic, the veil between reality and the invisible is so thin that you can actually see what is good and what is evil. And that makes you really frightened because no one else can see it, and you cannot talk to anyone about it. This is another drawing. In the Bible, there is a story of a man named Job. He is the richest man in the whole world, and he lives a righteous life fearing God. One day, all of God's angels and the evil Satan appears before the throne of God. God asks if they have noticed the righteous Job. Satan says that Job is only righteous because God has blessed him so much. Then God lets Satan take away everything in Job's life that is good, except his life, to show that Job is a righteous man who loves the Lord for real. It ends like this. Job is faithful towards God, and after many tests, Job gets a double portion back of all the things that he has lost in the trials for both his spirit, body, and soul. But the point is that in the tests, God removed his hand from Job's life and let Satan run rampant. I think God still does this in someone's lives. If a person is on their way to the bottom, like to hell, it seems like God still can give the devil room to destroy, so they, in their misery, has to wake up and call for God, which is better than going straight to hell with a smile around your face. I think this is what happened to me. I think God took his hand away so I could see the evil, because he knew that I would call for him. But I saw the evil. I had chosen the evil. I was doing witchcraft, tarot cards, yoga, sex, magic, astrology, and every other mystical thing I could get my hands on to seek God. And he knew that he would lead me straight to destruction. That is why I'm testifying about what I have seen, so others can be free. I spent all my money, almost all my money, on like this magic phone call hotline where you can call into like this fortune tellers, and I hoped that they could give me answers. One of them let me talk to her for over $4,000. They said truth, half truths, and lies. Some said completely insane things, and others I felt in my spirit that they sincerely wanted to help. One lady prayed for me to cut all the ties for this addiction that I had to this magic hotline. She was a Christian, she said. But most just said that things were gonna go okay, which gave me a certain kind of peace. It made the days go by, until I had to call again next morning to ask how the day would look like. It just had to go the way it went. At the end, I was so desperate that I called an emergency phone and I said I was going to kill myself. And they gave me, they took me in something that they call DPS, and it's like kind of like a mild version of psychiatry where you can come and rest, and it's kind of an open place where you can stay for 1 week. But from there, they put me into the mental hospital, you know, with locked doors and everything, by force, into Department A, like the first chapter. Okay,